thank Sister Sheila Jackson-Lee for showing up. Our Congresswoman is in the house for her. Thank you so much. And I want to thank the community for showing up because y'all know this is important to us. Can y'all hear me? Okay, y'all know this is important to us. So we I wanted to thank all y'all for coming out. I want to thank y'all for being a part of this because this is like Fifth Ward has been going through something for so long and we say no more. So for y'all showing up, showing us that y'all do care about y'all community as well as we do. So thank you again from us to you. And now I want to turn it over to Miss Jackie. Miss Jackie will take us into the meeting.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm not even sure if this is picking me up. Nope. All right, so we're rolling with it. Thank y'all for your patience. And I want to go ahead really quick, introduce myself, introduce Texas Health and Environment Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization that has been working to educate and engage the communities around the Union Pacific area and more specifically with the cancer cluster and the greater Fifth Ward area. And it's an honor to be here tonight impacting with co-hosting with Impact and hosting all of you. Before we get started, I want to let you guys know that we also have a virtual audience. So this is a hybrid format. We have the EPA along with other guests on Zoom. And so this meeting is being recorded via Zoom, which you've seen my team popping on and off of this screen here. So the folks on Zoom, we need you to drop your questions in the chat as you have them or hold them until the end because all of the lines on Zoom are muted. For those of you who are in attendance tonight, I ask that you please hold your questions until we open up the Q&A. On your agenda at the bottom, there is a place for you to jot down your notes. If you're like me, you might forget it. So if you think of something, jot it down. I don't want you to forget it. I really value your input, your concerns, your experiences, and your questions. There's nothing more valuable than local knowledge. And I myself, I'm not from the community. We need to hear from y'all. I come from an impacted community by contamination and cancer clusters on the east side. And from my experiences there, I know nothing's more important than hearing directly from the impacted community. All right. Now, I know that we have several elected officials who are here in person tonight. I believe we also have some who are joining us virtually. And if you are here and you would like to be recognized or make remarks, I'd love for you to raise your hand. All right, lovely. We have two officials over here who raised their hands. Let me make my way over there. We can do a run through in the office, but it does not compare to showing up with an hour to set up. Okay. All right.
Hello. Not in my district. We're in Senator Boris Miles' district. However, the location is very near some of my constituents in the Denver Harbor area. Is anyone here from Denver Harbor? Okay, we have a few people. And we've been battling this issue. I'm happy to be here to join Congresswoman Jackson-Lee, who's been in the trenches fighting for this for a number of years. Many of us have. We had a meeting several years ago at the Denver Harbor Multi-Service Center. So I'm glad that we're here now and getting to the thrust of what needs to be addressed. I know that there have been some issues that the EPA submitted to the TCEQ, and that's where our offices, mine and Senator Miles's office, he's represented here with staff. Santiago's here taking notes. And we want to make sure that the TCEQ is receiving this and hopefully executing it, doing something with it. And I'll just read a couple of these, but there's a whole list of issues that the EPA is weighing in on. They would like that the cleanup permit would include that Union Pacific initiate a pilot testing of more aggressive non-aqueous phase liquid, NaPl, it's what it's known as, recoveries on the site to assess their effectiveness in reducing the amount of NaPl seepage as compared to the current alternative. That Union Pacific conduct an additional evaluation of the on-site and off-site storm sewer system to determine the nature and extent of contamination present and the potential for NaPl, contaminated sediment, and contaminated groundwater to infiltrate storm sewer system pipes and migrate off-site. That Union Pacific develop a conceptual site model for the vapor intrusion pathway before final risk management decisions are made for this site. There are a few more, but for the sake of time, so that we get to hear from the community, we'll make sure that we share the rest of them with everybody that signs in. So I want to thank our partners, our community activist group, Air Alliance, and the THEA. Did I get that right? Yeah. Thank you for organizing this. You know, we have been in the trenches together fighting a lot of things. Of course, growing up in the East End in Manchester, taking on the chemical companies, shaming them to be better neighbors, and it's worked over the years. Now we have been taking on these concrete batch plants. So, every so often, and we're getting close. We shut one down in Aldine. We're trying to stop another one, but we know that this is happening in a very unusual way in Black and brown neighborhoods. So we continue to fight for justice, environmental justice in our communities, and just know that you have partners, you have policymakers who are on your side. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, Harris County Attorney Christian Menifee.
Yeah, I'll be really, really brief because I know that you all are here to hear from each other today. I'm Christian Menifee. I'm the Harris County Attorney, so that's a civil lawyer for Harris County. A special thank you to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee for being here, and Senator Alvarado, and of course, Trustee Bluford Daniels. Look, my office, we're the civil lawyers, right? We've been involved in this fight for a very, very long time. And the best way to think about this is there are two buckets, okay? Bucket number one is figuring out exactly how far the contamination spans, right? That's bucket number one. Bucket number two is putting a plan in place to solve the issue. You cannot put a plan in place to clean anything up, to help people, until you know what the hell happened. And so what we saw from the EPA in their letter was saying, hey, Union Pacific, we don't know exactly what happened. And we're looking at your investigation and what happened, and we believe that there are real deficiencies here. So I think it's incredibly important that Dr. Nance is now in this position, and that we're now in the position to continue to lean on the EPA to make sure that they're leaning on the TCEQ so that we can find out the scope and expansion of this contamination. And only then can the TCEQ even consider any type of cleanup plan. So my office is going to continue to submit super long letters to the TCEQ, making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But the most important part of this process is each and every one of you being here today, making sure that the EPA knows that we have their back and that we're pushing in the same direction that we are. So I'm incredibly grateful for this administration, and also for the Congresswoman. You're going to hear from her in a second. But let's keep pushing, folks, because my folks have poured over, right? And you all were at that meeting last year in the midst of COVID, when the TCEQ tried to talk to folks in the community over the phone, right? And had engineers on the line talking jargon to everybody that none of us understood, right? So it's time to hold their feet to the fire so that we can understand exactly what happened. And only then can we figure out how to clean it up. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, yes. I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We've been working together extensively, and I thank her very much for, we need to stop worrying about the boundaries of our districts and realize that we are an extended and wide community. I know that Senator Alvarado and Senator Miles have a very strong working relationship. We're in Senator Miles' district, and I know that we are delighted that you're here, and I'm delighted that I have as a partner, very strong partner, Senator Boris Miles, who helped get rid of a concrete batch in Acres home. We worked together on that. So let's give both Senator Alvarado and Senator Miles an applause, if you would please, for the work that they have done. I also acknowledge Trustee Kathy Buford Daniels, and I think yes is an HISD, isn't it, the prep school? So they're in your part of your system, but let me know that she has a great interest in the environmental community for our children. And we add that our elders and the neighbors who are here, give her a very big hand, please. I think that is worth noting. And County Attorney Menifee, thank you for an activist legal team that is the people's lawyer. And thank you for being the people's lawyer. We are working together as I was coming here to speak to Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg, who I expect will be in our town soon. I'm inviting him to come here because of what we're dealing with and confronting in another issue. But I want to thank you for being in the forefront of this issue. So again, County Attorney, you can share with him your appreciation. County Attorney Menifee. So let me, more than 3 years, almost 4 years ago, we met in the Fifth Ward Multi-Service Center, but our biggest meeting was with Aaron Brockovich at Wheatley High School. And preceding that, or during that time frame, I first started walking through some streets in Fifth Ward and knocked on doors, just took a microcosm, a block. I think Kathy was around us at that time, and every single door that I knocked on had a victim either living with cancer or a whole history of family members who had died with cancer. It was the Texas Department of Health that we instructed. I think it was after the Deer Park fires. We had fires and we had that meeting in Fifth Ward, and I instructed them that you needed to do a cancer cluster assessment. Let me also thank the city of Houston. I'm not sure if they're represented, who thereafter did some further cancer clusters, but the numbers were so stark, so devastating, so overwhelming of the extent of cancer clusters that is one of the things that truly impacted the EPA. And you will hear from the Region 6 administrator who comes from right out of this community. So we're very lucky. And I know that she'll be coming down and really looking at some of the sites. So it was out of those that we continued to press, even under the Trump administration, the EPA administrator then, to try to get relief. But in the order of federalism and states' rights, you have to start with the state first to give them the opportunity to make amends, to fix it. To be honest with you, and this is not taking the finger and looking this way, I'm willing to accept responsibilities if the federal government has not been acting. I must say that under this administration, they have been energetic, they have been forthright, and they have been on the run toward us, helping us. And so I want to thank President Biden, Region Administrator, EPA Administrator Reagan, who you know came here and spent a day, came back, and really has this front and center, met with a lot of you. I happened to have been in Washington and got in for the last meeting as I flew in, but I'm glad that he was here on the ground. But here's where we are. The state now has been instructed what to do. They have been told what they need to do to give you can't do anything with a report. I understand that. And you say you government folk are always working on reports, but that is the engine that then further moves the Environmental Protection Agency. I am still fighting for us to establish a Superfund. That is on my agenda, to dig deep and clean up. But all of this is building toward that concept. So I'm going to just give you again, so you can know what the EPA has told the TCEQ to do. It's very simple. Expand your model. It's too small. Go to Cashmere Gardens, go to Fifth Ward. You may be up northeast, who knows? You may be down, go over to the east end. Expand the model, make it big. People have been contaminated everywhere. Expand it. And they're right. Expand the model. You can't do it in a couple of blocks. You can't do it in the site that is in Fifth Ward because it's spread. So expand your model. The second is just what we did on our own. When we got the Texas Department of Health to come down and do studies, that was data. They could not disprove the data. They could not put under the table the data. They couldn't cover up the data. They couldn't cover up that people had died. They couldn't cover up that families had 3 and 4 and 5 generations. Oh, I remember Uncle Joe, and he had something called something. And you must remember, in the minority community, people were not saying things like breast cancer. They weren't saying things like prostate cancer. They were barely saying cancer versus lung and brain cancer. People didn't really know what you had because you weren't getting the diagnosis, or it was end stage, and before you knew it, this poor person had passed away. So now we're more sophisticated. Families are more sophisticated. People are willing to open up, because in past days, things that shouldn't seem to be shameful, maybe to some families it was. So-and-so has cancer. Nobody wants to talk about it. So they want us to get more data. That's a simple process, isn't it? Get more information. And the last one you'll like. You cannot operate in a vacuum. TC, you cannot do this. We want you to develop a community panel, a community advisory committee. Expand the community involvement. Is that good? Oh, I can't hear you. And so here's my point. And Senator, this is where we are going to need you. Obviously, there's a process of comment. There's also a process of drag your feet. This was issued on March 14th. It is now it's not even March, April 19th. Once you get past the 15th of April, somebody said they might have been doing their taxes, they were due yesterday. You're already into the end of April. Once you get past mid-month, you're already at the end of the month, and they have not responded yet. So I know there are time frames, but I think it would be very helpful if we collectively together indicated to them that we are serious, that they need to respond quickly, because EPA is ready to intervene with oversight, but they must do so based on information. And I am right there with them, step and step together, for them to be able to be in place but with information. So again, we walked the streets, we held huge meetings, any number of press conferences on the site of Union Pacific. We engaged them, Union Pacific. In fact, I know Councilmember Gallegos is trying to engage them on another matter. And of course, you know what that is can't get across the tracks. There are a lot of matters that one has to deal with when you're dealing with this large industry. And I know that Union Pacific has to perform its corporate duties, its tasks, its responsibilities. But I also know that there's always a better way. There's a better mousetrap. There's a better pathway that you can do both transit of goods through communities, just a side point, and not sit on the tracks forever, because we're too sophisticated now. We have the technology to do it right. Just get it and utilize technology to have your trains moving in certain ways to avoid disruption of communities. The same thing to be able to cure and clean up the impact that has been unfortunately felt by so many of you. So I'm going to welcome, I think she may be almost next, the EPA. Okay, and then I will come back again after the EPA administrator for just a brief moment. Thank you so very much. And thank you all so very much for being here and staying in the fight. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we have online joining us a representative from Representative Dutton's office.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Hello and thank you. Representative Harold Dutton had been trying to get on and he had some technical difficulties with being able to log on. So I'm here. And of course, Abner Lyons is also there in the audience representing District 142. I want to say thank you to the Congresswoman, to Senator Boris Miles, and all of the other folk who are there supporting and fighting this good fight for the people of Fifth Ward and the people of all of our districts. Harold Dutton, State Representative Harold Dutton, as you know, is behind you. Fifth Ward is his home. He's been there in that fight. He's been there in the trenches fighting, and he is still there fighting with Senator Boris Miles, as well as Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. So we are listening, we are taking notes, and we will be right there in the fight for that community, for our community. And I just wanted to say that to everyone, that we are here, we are listening, and we have been in that fight and in the trenches with you.
So much for those remarks. And now I'm honored to introduce our special guest from the virtual space in Dallas, Dr. Nance. She is the EPA Region 6 administrator. And that is essentially, she is the woman appointed to oversee the 5 southern states for the US EPA. Dr. Nance.
Greetings, everyone from Dallas. I'm just reminded every time I'm here with, in this neighborhood talking about this issue and with the Congresswoman Jackson Lee in the room, were it not for her work that started years ago, we wouldn't even be here talking about this. There are many communities like this that live with these problems, and those problems are never, their voices and their problems are not raised up. And we are lucky to have elected officials that do that, because it's necessary. In order for the problem to get solved, it has to be raised up. The voices have to be raised up. And so I just wanted to just say thank you to Congresswoman Jackson Lee. I was there 2.5 years ago when she invited Erin Brockovich and all of the leaders that could say anything about this problem. They were all on stage with her. making promises to the community that they wouldn't let this go, that they would continue to fight and work on this. And here we are 2.5 years later in the fight together. And so we need to remember where this started. And so I just wanted to say that to get started. But I do have some staff here with me today who are experts on the letter that was sent to TCEQ and are going to be breaking down that argument, breaking down that request so everyone can understand that and be ready to answer questions at the end. So I'd like to pass it over to Stacy Dwyer, who is one of my special assistants, to take it from here.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for the invite to attend this important meeting. I also want to thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee. I was part of coming down with the Administrator Regan for the Journey to Justice. And I know Congresswoman had been really instrumental in getting the administrator to Houston. And so one of the things that you will hear later when Melissa Smith will give the presentation is a result of those efforts of us re-looking at some of the ways in which the draft permit was tailored, and for us to really take a look at all of the concerns that all of the community from your concerns that you've expressed to us, and from all of the concerns that we've gotten from the elected officials. And so thank you again for having us. And we are trying to move toward getting some solutions and some answers for you. And so we thank you.
Congresswoman Lee, did you have another remark to make? Now we're actually going to get into the presentation over what the RCRA process is. Yes. Well, I told them that they need to speed it up because we are running behind schedule. So hopefully 10, 15 minutes. They were planning on 20, but we're going to try to cut it a little short. All right, lovely. Rachel? I did that.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel Jordan, and I'm the Assistant Director of Texas Health and Environment Alliance. Yeah. I wanted to start this meeting off by giving y'all a quick overview of what RCRA is and where we are in the permitting process so that we can have a better understanding of the community's role in the process and what exactly that is we're dealing with. So what is RCRA? RCRA is the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It is a law that gives the EPA the authority to manage hazardous and non-hazardous waste from cradle to grave. Cradle to grave is a term you may hear that just means that these kinds of waste are managed closely from the time they are created or generated to when and if they are ever transported and all the way through until they are ultimately disposed of or stored indefinitely. This law allows the EPA to make legally enforceable rules for hazardous waste management, but there are a lot of RCRA sites, close to 500,000 as of 2019. So the EPA delegates their management, monitoring, and enforcement authority to state agencies like the TCEQ. The TCEQ takes on the role of the EPA and can approve permits that create plans for proper disposal and storage. So the state agency plays a key role in the implementation and enforcement of RCRA requirements. For every site that is managed under RCRA, there are 7 stages of corrective action that happen over its lifetime. We start with the initial site assessment, where the site is looked at to see if there is a cleanup that needs to be done. If a cleanup is necessary, they move to the site characterization stage, where the agency, in this case the TCEQ, determines how bad the problem is and how urgently it needs to be cleaned up. If the need for cleanup is immediate, interim actions can be put in place to help control those immediate threats while the site is being studied more in depth. An example of this would be necessary if, say, there was a chemical that was leaking into the public water system. It wouldn't be right for us to wait for the site assessment to be done. They need to get it fixed right away. During the evaluation of remedial alternative stage, the site owner, in this case, the Union Pacific, will work with the lead agency here at the TCEQ to find the best solution for this particular site based on the setup of the site, the conditions surrounding the site, and a variety of other site specifics. Once the best remedy for this site is selected, the owner and agency continue to work together to set the design, start construction, manage the day-to-day operations, and maintain the selected remedy. As the remedy is implemented, we slide into the next stage, which is tracking progress. Here, the selected corrective action will be monitored by the TCEQ until the cleanup is complete. And finally, long-term care. This can involve permits, zoning restrictions, and administrative controls put in place to ensure that the site is not harmful to human health or the environment going forward. So now that we know the steps of the cleanup process, I want to discuss the permit. Firstly, what is a permit under RCRA? A permit is a legally binding document that sets out the rules and guidelines that the specific entities waste management. It includes important information such as details about the waste and how they plan to manage the waste over its lifetime. There are many different kinds of permits depending on the type of waste and type of facility. Because RCRA is put in place to make sure that there are records and plans for all types of waste, you cannot do anything with RCRA classified wastes without an approved permit from the TCEQ. The catch here with that is that the permit approval process takes a long time. It usually takes about a year to get a permit issued, but as we all know, it can take a lot longer than that. This is because there are steps required to make sure that the permit is protective, complete, technically sound, and based on solid science, and it has to be legally enforceable. Public comment periods are put in place to keep the community informed and allow for outside entities and community members to give their opinions and ideas about the effectiveness of the plan. Now to talk a little bit about the specific permit that Union Pacific has up for renewal. They have what is called a post-closure permit for industrial hazardous waste, specifically for creosote. This type of permit must be renewed at least every 10 years to reevaluate if what's being done is still the best option to protect human health and the environment. And that brings us to where we are in the process. Union Pacific is attempting to renew their post-closure permit with some major changes. Changes to the permit aren't necessarily a bad thing, but the process is lengthy, as you guys all know. The comment period for this renewal started in December of 2014 and will end on the May 3rd of this year after the public meeting. The public comment period is so important to these permits because it is your chance to tell Union Pacific and the TCEQ what you expect out of this continued cleanup. The EPA has submitted comments, and that is what they are here to speak with us about tonight. Lone Star Legal Aid has also been submitting comments on behalf of Impact since 2018. Comment periods typically last around 30 days unless an extension is granted. And at the end of that 30 days, all of the oral and written comments are reviewed and responded to, and some are implemented into the next draft of the permit, which will then go through another comment period, and the cycle continues until we have 100% approval for the permit from the TCEQ. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to Rodrigo so he can tell y'all a little bit more about what to expect as this comment period comes to an end and how you can use this information to have your voice heard by the agency that has the authority to make Union Pacific clean this up.
Thank you, Rachel, for that great comment. I'm assuming that if I speak into the mic, people can hear me and Zoom. Okay. Again, my name is Rodrigo Cantu. I'm an environmental justice attorney with Lone Star Legal Aid. Like Rachel said, I am representing a group called Impact. We have Miss Glenn from Impact here. We got Miss Beal. We have Miss Edwards. Where'd you go, Miss Edwards? Oh, there's you. Oh, you're right next to. And if there's other members of Impact in the room, go ahead and raise your hand. Like was said, that's right. Like was said, this permit has been up for renewal since December of 2014. That is to say that the comment period has been open for 7.5 years now. So if you wanted to get your comments in, you could do that online. You can do that in written form. I did want to briefly prepare you guys for that meeting on May 3rd in 2 weeks. Like was mentioned earlier, we had a meeting, a public meeting last June. It was virtual, and it was very difficult for people to participate from their home, to ask questions. And so there was a lot of frustration surrounding that public meeting. And of course, all Impact and others in the community asked that that comment period be extended, and that was done. And the comment period is going to come to an end on May 3rd. It's going to be in person. Let's just remind ourselves that it is a 2-phase meeting. Phase 1 is sort of a question and answer period. You can ask questions of the TCEQ. You can ask questions of Union Pacific. All of that is not on the record. That is to say, the responses they give to you don't make it onto the administrative record. Phase 2 is not a question and answer. That is instead an opportunity for you to give your oral comment about the permit and actually get that comment on the record. So, when I've been to these public meetings with other community members, I know a lot of people get frustrated with phase 1, and a lot of people end up leaving before the phase 2 has even begun. And so a lot of their comments don't end up making it on the record. And so I would urge you to stay through the entirety of the May 3rd meeting. Use that first portion, the question and answer section, to learn as much about the permit as possible. And then to use the responses to inform your comments, your oral comments that you'll be submitting, that you could choose to submit during phase 2 of the meeting. And like Rachel mentioned, we've submitted comments on behalf of Impact over the course of several years now. And recently Legal Aid launched a resource page and a how to submit comments. And so if you go to that resource page on our website, you'll actually be able to see how to submit comments. And my one of our staff people, Sam Salas, is in the back. Sam, if you could raise your hand. Sam has got some flyers there with some a fact sheet, as well as this flyer that will educate you on how to submit those comments. And that's the extent of my presentation for right now. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Also, I'm not sure if Rodrigo mentioned that the information for the May 3rd meeting is on the back side of the agenda. So there's the details on how you can join in person and virtually.
I know that we're going to get into, thank you very much for excellent presentation. And I want to reinforce that Senator Boris Miles is here, has made it here, and will be hosting the May 3rd meeting, which I hope to join him on. But I want to thank him very much. That's the meeting that you were mentioning, which is like a working meeting. But I want to remind us as we are here, and Impact, let me just have you all stand, please. Let's not be so modest. Impact, please stand up. You are representing so many. Your seeds have been planted, and you have generated this array of activism, and you deserve our applause and, of course, our continued collaboration. So let me give you another hand as well. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I will. And let me say that. Let me note Sandra's unending commitment and fight, and who fell victim in the pandemic to COVID-19. We honor her and we thank her, and her memory is in this room. thank you so very much for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. So again, I just want to remind us, because I need us to be as energetic, as ready to go as we could. And that is, for years, creosote. So this is decades of your family members going to work for Union Pacific year after year after year. And the creosote getting into the soil and permeating, and soil and contamination is not contained. It spreads. And that is why the EPA wants you to, wants the TCEQ to expand the horizon, because it does not and is not contained. And so when we went down the neighborhood block, these family members said, well, we grow our vegetables in our yard, our tomatoes or whatever it was. And out of that, contamination came. But the rains, the soil, it moved, or it could be on clothing. And so that is how it continued to spread. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is we need to have the trajectory, the history of how we got here. And we need to have the present, how should I say it, holders of the company name to be upfront and forward with all of you. And the government can do so much. Once the EPA gets involved, we can then have oversight to ensure that Union Pacific does its cleanup job. But at the same time, I want to make it very clear that I am committed to individuals being compensated, because they have lost so many lives, relatives, or they are themselves ill. And that is something that we are not ignoring. I am not counselor, I'm not attorney, I'm in the public sector. But I can say that this documentation should contribute to individuals who are, in fact, have suffered an injury. That is important. And so I may be being redundant, but I want to make the point that the state agency is not being responsive to what the EPA needs now. And you as citizens can be part of advocating for them to hurry on, to be responsive to the federal government. And as I said, to expand the area, collect data, and to set up the community advisory committee. There's no reason why they can't do that now. There's nothing stopping them from doing the community advisory committee. And that's what I'd like to see happen. So please understand the connection of the contamination. And here we are in 2022, and it has not been effectively cleaned up. And so I'm delighted that Senator Miles will be taking the next step. This is April the 19th. And less than 3 weeks from now, we'll be in another meeting on May 3rd that will bring about lawyers and bring about representatives from Union Pacific. And I'm going to try to add to that list of individuals that will come, Senator Miles, if you would welcome them, because I do think that we should have people coming from all over representing Union Pacific that can answer questions and give responses. So let me conclude my remarks by saying, in this meeting, I am saying that Union Pacific has not been responsive. And what we want to see happen is for them to move expeditiously on what the Environmental Protection Agency has instructed them to do. We've already passed a month time, 30 days, and there's been no response. Soon as a response comes in, the Environmental Protection Agency will increase its oversight over this process. And you will see the hand of the federal government, along with counselors and advocates and local elected officials advocating and collaborating together. And so my message to Union Pacific is, let's move the solution faster. Let's wake up and answer the call of the people. I'll say it again, let's move the solution faster. And answer the question, why, and the next question of what you're going to do. And on behalf of the EPA, who I will not be directly speaking for, but having oversight over the Environmental Protection Agency, let me thank them for responding and not letting up. And that is, of course, doing their job and their task. And that is the federal government, which is the umbrella on a rainy day. And we've had some rainy days here. We've had some poor days here. And so we need the federal government to ensure that Union Pacific, based upon state actions, does their job. That's what we want to see tonight. So I'm very grateful that we have this, but we started, as the regional administrator said, we're really going on almost 5 years that we began these meetings, and people began to stand up even more about their sickness. And as we've indicated, our late and beloved Sandra that stood the gap. And I remember people coming out of hospitals and coming to our press conference that we had. They just said, well, I just left the hospital. I just left my treatment. I just left my chemo. And they came to stand with us. And so we don't have to worry about, do we have the evidence? We have the evidence. Union Pacific, do you have the response? Do you have the solution? And the state of Texas, TCEQ, are you ready to stand with us to get this job done? So thank you very much, and I'm ready to listen to the next steps.
Thank you very much. All right. So now in terms of who can help, the Congresswoman listed off a lot of entities and who can help. Did you need me? Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was about Ms. Smalls. Okay, 1 second. We have remarks from Impact, and then I'll get back into the presentation of who can help, and then we'll hear from the EPA.
I'd like to say thank you all for coming, because this has touched a lot of families over there. And I don't want my nephew, who's special because of this chemical, to have to move, because he know everywhere to go in Fifth Ward. And if they don't clean up, it's gonna have to make a big change in all our lives when he feel like he's independent now, living in Fifth Ward under this chemical. And I look forward to this being cleaned up. And a lot of people don't want to move, because if you grow up somewhere and you were happy there, you don't want to move to a place you can't even speak to your next door neighbor, because you don't know them very well. And it's not fair for people in Fifth Ward to have to keep going through this and trying to talk to Union Pacific and trying to get things done. TSU has helped us. Texas A&M has helped us. And I thank them for all the findings that they have shown in the neighborhood, and they have not been good. But I want to be able to say to my nephew, I've been trying to get him to come stay with me, but he said, I don't want to stay with you because I don't know where to go. I don't even know how to go to the store. But him living in Fifth Ward all his life, he knows to go to places I don't know. So I just want all this cleaned up and people to get back to their normal. They want to have a normal life like anybody else, but you can't when you know you're sitting on poison. Wake up and don't know the next day if you're gonna have cancer. Someone in your house can die. If you ever listen to a dead holler, we heard a lot of dead hollers on that street. And I knew when it was a happy hollering, when somebody had accomplished something, and a dead holler. We had more dead hollers than we had success on that street. So I like to thank you all for coming to hear this story. But it's far worse than you could even imagine to know young kids losing their mom at 35 years old on that street. And you waking your daughter up to go to school, she's 18 and she don't wake up. And that is not a good thing to say, let's just sweep this under the rug. Thank you.
Yes. So I think that um, fits perfectly into the notion of who can help. Who has the authority here to see that this is cleaned up right? Enough is enough. What did you say? 7 years of a public comment period? That's ridiculous. I mean, come on. You know, these are human lives. The people in this room know that. And I am hoping that after this meeting tonight, in preparation for May 3rd, the community understands who the target is, where the EPA stands, and who can help. There are a lot of various areas, and you know, I'm sorry that our screen is not too visible, but the big bubble here is the RCRA process being overseen by Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, by the state environmental entity. And tonight we're going to hear from the federal level, the Environmental Protection Agency, about their comments to TCEQ, weighing in on this permit application. And I can tell you, when I read the EPA's comments, it made two things extremely clear to me. First, they are digging in. They are going into all the records. They're looking at the data. They're seeing what's been done, what can be done, and really paying attention to all the details. That's critical. Second, the other thing that was so apparent to me by EPA's comments was they are listening to the community. When Administrator Regan came and walked through the streets of Fifth Ward, it wasn't just a press show. He heard y'all. And they took that back and they created an action from it. And that's been pretty rare in the 10 plus years I've been an environmental activist. So in terms of accountability from the state agency, the EPA is watching, they're commenting, and they're letting their voices be heard. And we're asking that you do the same on May 3rd, that you join that meeting and let your voice be heard, particularly in that comment section. I do want to let you know, though, there are a lot of different processes going on around the contamination, around the health concerns. You know, we as an organization at FIA, we work to bring accurate and reliable information to the communities that's accessible, meeting you where you are, bringing information that's actually important. And hopefully we did a little bit of that earlier with the permit information, because meeting after meeting, we were seeing people going, what is this permit? What is this permit? And so trying to answer some of those questions that the residents have, but also digging in on the health information. The community that I come from, we handed over the 17 types of cancer that we most commonly saw through our health surveys, which we have here in hard copy. And you are welcome to fill it out. The information is confidential. We take this information and we advocate to the health departments and say, we're concerned about these types of cancer we're seeing. In the community I come from, we gave them 17 types of cancer. They came back and said 14 of them were in abnormally high rates. So not only are we working to help find resolution and answers on the health aspect, but also the public process. Then you have, as Congresswoman mentioned, an area where there's private litigation, an area where people might choose to go to seek representation for harm to their health or property. And then you have the public process. And that's the RCRA process. That's the process the EPA has weighed on that I've been referencing. And tonight, we're going to hear from the EPA about their comments to TCEQ. But I want to remind you, EPA is not the agency that actually does the cleanup. They are weighing on the state who has the authority to see that this site is cleaned up properly. So tonight, to talk about the EPA's comments to TCEQ, we have Melissa Smith. She is with EPA Region 6, and she is the branch chief for the RCRA division for the 5 southern states. Really excited for y'all to hear from Melissa. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. I couldn't unmute myself. Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to attend your meeting tonight. As Jackie said, my name is Melissa Smith. I am the chief of the RCRA branch in the EPA Region 6 office located in Dallas. I am very happy to be here to provide an overview of the comments that we submitted to TCEQ on the draft permit for the UPRR Houston Wood Preserving Works site. I am going to request control of the screen so that I can go through the slides. Marissa, can you nod your head if you guys can hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, do I have control?
You should. Are you having trouble?
I am. So
Okay.
let's give up the control and I will just have you guys go through the slides for me. So yes, okay. Slide 2, yep. So just as a little bit of background, you may remember, as was mentioned earlier, that our EPA administrator, Michael Regan, conducted a Journey to Justice tour across the country, which included several areas in the South. As part of that tour, he visited the Fifth Ward and Kashmir Gardens communities. During his tour, he made a commitment to action. Following up on that commitment, the actions that we have taken include reviewing the proposed permit for the cleanup of the Houston Wood Preserving Works site and submitting those comments to TCEQ. I'm going to repeat a little bit about what Rachel, Rodrigo, and Jackie discussed earlier in the presentation, because I think it is important to understanding the process. So as was mentioned, the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, or RCRA, is the program that regulates the management of hazardous waste, including the cleanup of contamination associated with the management of that waste. TCEQ has an authorized RCRA hazardous waste program. And what that means is that the state has developed and is implementing hazardous waste regulations that are at least as stringent as the federal regulations, as EPA regulations. EPA has approved and authorized their program, which delegates the primary responsibility of implementation to the state in lieu of EPA. So as the primary implementer of the RCRA program, TCEQ issues permits and oversees cleanups of RCRA sites in Texas. EPA's role in states that are authorized is to provide guidance, technical support, and oversight of the program, which can include reviewing and providing comments on draft permits. So on March 14th of this year, we submitted comments to TCEQ on the draft permit for the cleanup of the UPRR Houston Wood Preserving Works site. Next slide. So as far as the comments that we submitted, there were 2 general overarching comments, which were that there may be potential data gaps in the sampling that has been done so far for both on and off-site areas. And also that there is the need for more meaningful engagement of the public in the activities at the site going forward. Next slide. Now I'm going to run through our more specific comments that we made and talk about those in a little bit more detail. So first, and this was mentioned early on in the meeting, we believe that there should be an evaluation of more aggressive recovery methods for the creosote material, which we referred to in our letter, in our comment letter, as the non-aqueous phase liquid, or napl, specifically from the intermodal yard. There seems to be a shallow mass of this tar-like substance beneath the pavement on the yard, which seeps up through the pavement, especially during warm weather. The pavement cap appears to only be partly effective in containing the creosote substance, and cracks in the cap could allow for rainwater infiltration, which could further mobilize contaminants in the groundwater. The current creosote recovery sump system that was installed in the yard doesn't appear to be that effective in collecting recoverable material due to its tar-like consistency, and rainwater that collects in the sumps could also potentially mobilize contaminants. We recommended that UPRR pilot test more aggressive recovery technologies to reduce the mass and also to take actions to prevent rainwater infiltration through the cap, through the cracks in the cap. We also made the comment that there should be additional evaluation of on and off-site storm sewer systems. Volatile and semi-volatile contaminants, including benzene and naphthalene, were detected in some manhole locations of the storm sewers along the periphery of the site. And on site in the intermodal yard, camera surveys of the sewer pipes showed an oily sheen, and sediment in the lines appeared to be impacted by total petroleum hydrocarbons. We recommended an additional evaluation of the on-site and off-site storm sewer system to determine the nature and extent of contamination present and the potential for contaminants to infiltrate the storm sewer and migrate off-site. Since the area is prone to flooding, we recommended that UPRR evaluate the potential for high rainfall events to swamp the on-site sewer system and result in runoff into off-site areas. And lastly, for this particular comment, we also recommended that UPRR conduct an assessment of other on-site utility corridors, such as water, gas, and electric lines, as potential migration pathways for contaminants to migrate off-site. Regarding vapor intrusion, this is where we look at the potential for intrusion of contaminant vapors into structures such as homes, presenting a potential inhalation risk. We generally look at multiple lines of evidence to determine if there is an exposure pathway for vapors from contaminants. This includes looking at soil gas data, shallow groundwater data, distance to the source, and comparisons to EPA screening levels. Based on the existing data, the vapor intrusion pathway does not appear to be complete. However, there are other lines of evidence which we recommend be considered, along with developing a conceptual site model specific for the vapor intrusion pathway. Specifically, we recommended that additional active soil vapor samples be collected as close to structures as possible and to depths below the building foundations. The samples taken previously were primarily from the city rights of way and not adjacent to structures. The goal is to get a sample that's the most representative of what would be immediately beneath the structure. Also, seasonal sampling is recommended because there can be variability during different times of the year. And lastly, regarding the potential for the vapor intrusion pathway, we recommended that UPRR assess the potential for preferential pathways, such as storm drains, utility corridors, and fiber optic cables, which may serve as a conduit for contaminants to travel closer to structures. Regarding off-site soil sampling, over the years, there have been several independent off-site soil sampling events which have taken place, which make it difficult to gain a complete picture of off-site soil assessments, particularly within the neighborhood. The sampling appears to have been limited primarily along and near Liberty Road. Soil that may have been contaminated from past wood treating operations might have spread further into the neighborhood through air dispersion or surface water runoff. We recommended in our comments that UPRR provide a summary of all soil sampling that has been conducted in the neighborhood to help determine if additional sampling may be warranted, to conduct that sampling if data gaps are identified, or to provide the reasoning for why additional sampling isn't needed. And as far as for on-site sampling, pentachlorophenol was likely used as a wood treating compound at the site, and commercial pentachlorophenol mixtures used to treat wood are known to contain dioxins and furans as impurities. 2 samples were collected from former process areas on site, which were determined to be below risk levels. However, due to the limited number of samples collected, we recommended additional samples be collected and compared to EPA screening values for those potential contaminants. We noted in our comments that the draft permit does not include a discussion of ambient air sampling to be conducted during remediation activities. In our discussions with TCEQ, they indicated that UPRR will be required to conduct environmental sampling, including air, particulate, and water runoff during remediation activities. We recommended that the permit require that all environmental sampling and monitoring plans be shared with the community and other stakeholders well ahead of any construction activities. And last, but certainly not least, we recommended that there needs to be more engagement with the community. Specifically, we recommended that UPRR develop and implement a community outreach or public outreach plan for the site. This would involve meeting with the community to identify the community's needs, concerns, and expectations, and identify how those needs and concerns are going to be addressed. We also recommended that UPRR develop and maintain a mailing list with contact information for interested parties, and for them to regularly release information and sampling results on an easily accessible website. Next slide, please. I do want to mention that we have been in discussions with TCEQ regarding our comments, and that even before we formally submitted them, they were already working with UPRR on some of the issues, such as ensuring that they conduct the on and off-site sewer investigation. So what happens now? The draft permit is still open for public comment. TCEQ has scheduled an in-person public meeting to take place on May 3rd. They are accepting public comments until the close of that meeting. They will then be reviewing all of the comments received and will be responding to those comments, including the ones that they received from us, from EPA. And next slide, please. So I think we have plenty of time now for questions. I do want to jump to some that Jackie had shared with me earlier. Thank you so much for sending me the questions in advance. So I am going to go ahead and run through those now. If you want to go to the next slide, I did put those on the slide so you can see. Oh, sorry, that maybe didn't come through very well, but I'm going to run through each of these questions and then we can get to any additional questions that you may have. So the first one, is the EPA going to participate in TCEQ's public hearing on May 3rd? And if so, how? So the purpose of the May 3rd public meeting is for TCEQ and UPRR to provide information to the public about the permit and for the public to ask questions and provide comments to TCEQ. EPA is still evaluating whether to participate as an observer during that meeting. And the second question, if TCEQ doesn't adopt the EPA's comment suggestions, what steps will the EPA take? As part of TCEQ's process, they will respond to all comments made and will explain how the comments were incorporated or the reason for decisions not to adopt certain suggestions. If TCEQ doesn't include some of EPA's requirements and we do not agree with the reasons for not including them, we will consider using our own authorities to require those conditions. With that said, as I mentioned earlier, we do know that TCEQ is already directing UPRR to address some of the issues that were identified in our comments. For example, requiring them to investigate the concerns associated with the sewer lines. The next question, does the EPA feel that the proposed remedial strategy of a slurry wall and multi-phase extraction are aggressive enough? We do expect that the slurry wall will be effective in preventing further migration of contamination from the source area. The multi-phase extraction pilot project to address off-site contamination will be evaluated after it's implemented to determine its effectiveness. And we do recommend that more aggressive remedial strategies should be evaluated for the on-site contamination to address the source area and the creosote seeps that occur on the intermodal yard. Next question. EPA asked TCEQ to require meaningful involvement of the public. Can EPA better define this? So EPA has defined on our environmental justice webpage that meaningful involvement of the public means that people have an opportunity to participate in decisions about activities that may affect their environment or health, and that the public's contribution can influence the regulatory agency's decision, that the community concerns will be considered in the decision-making process, and that decision makers will seek out and facilitate the involvement of those potentially affected. In order to facilitate meaningful involvement of the public, UPRR could develop a public engagement plan, which we have recommended, which includes talking with the community to identify their needs regarding communication and engagement in the process. For example, Thea has indicated to us that the UPRR website is not truly accessible to the public because the information is not available in a way that is useful to you. This is where there should be a conversation between UPRR and the community about what would be useful. I encourage you to provide these comments to TCEQ during the comment period so that they can take them into consideration for the permit. The next question, is the EPA looking at what other types of remedies have been effective at cleaning up creosote contamination at other sites? Creosote is difficult to clean up and takes a very long time. The options for removing it from the environment are limited. There have been many studies conducted regarding different remedial technologies. Containment and source reduction are the primary remedies that are used. The remedies that have been selected for this cleanup, such as multi-phase extraction, will be evaluated for effectiveness throughout the process. Next question. Does EPA have a plan to address probable pushback from Union Pacific about the existing community webpage as accessible information for the community? Feedback from the community to TCEQ and UPRR is critical to ensuring that the community is receiving information in a way that is accessible and useful to you. So as I mentioned previously, I encourage you to share your comments and concerns with TCEQ regarding the accessibility of the information on the webpage during their comment period. In our oversight role, we will work with TCEQ to help address the community's concerns. Next question. Can the EPA ensure that the TCEQ fills the data gaps before approving any new remedial alternatives? As I mentioned previously, we have been in discussions with TCEQ, and we know that there are already steps being taken to address the data gaps. For example, the sewer lines, having them do that additional investigation and address any issues identified there. The next question, will EPA continue to be involved in the Union Pacific RCRA permit? If so, how? Yes, in our oversight role, we will continue to review the information associated with the permit, and we'll continue to work with TCEQ to ensure that the actions taken under the permit are protective. And last question, what authority does the EPA have to ensure that this site is cleaned up effectively? The primary authority is the RCRA permit issued by the state, and we are working with them to ensure that it is protective. If there are still issues which we don't feel are adequately resolved, we do have authorities under RCRA and CERCLA which could be considered. However, the most timely and effective authority is using the existing state permit authority. And that was it for the questions that we received in advance. So I will turn it over to you guys to facilitate any other questions that we may have. I have not seen the chat, so I don't know if there were questions maybe in the chat for me.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm not sure how much you can see of our audience, but I was just in the back of the room and a couple of points you hit. I saw a lot of heads nodding throughout the room. So thank you for that presentation. Great. If everyone would give Melissa a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's next? May 3rd, the meeting at TCEQ. And our next meeting, our next community meeting will be the 28th of June. So let's go ahead and open up the floor. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. All right, everybody, we'd like to hear from Senator Miles tonight.
Good evening. I think we can do a little bit better than that. Good evening. To first thank Impact for allowing me to be here this evening. Although we have not been in direct conversation with one another, we have been on the battlefield for the last 6 years as it relates to the creosote count, this creosote facility in Union Pacific. We started off with different entities that were wanting to represent the community. And I think that we should be happy that we had entities that wanted to represent. And I think every one of us working together, we can all get it done. So I'm happy to be here on behalf of Impact. I'm happy to see my Congresswoman always, always, always in the trenches. Y'all give it up for her, please. Always in the trenches. If there's a fight, some people like to run away from fights. I can always count on my Congresswoman to run to the fight. And she's been actively involved in this process for some time now. Yes, we have called for TCEQ to come down and answer questions in person, unlike we had a couple of years ago during COVID, and it was all virtual. I don't think we were able to, as a community, get our point across and get our questions answered. So I'm very thankful, very, very thankful that May 3rd, they've agreed to come on down as a request. This is a very serious issue. And if you ask me personally, we've been kicking this can down the street just a little too long, okay? It's just that simple. And it's now time to start taking some serious action and holding someone responsible for the deaths and the conditions of our community. I've got here in my folder that my staff has put together. I can give you a timeline if you want to go through that. I don't want to bore everybody going all the way back to 1870 and 1985 on this particular location, coming all the way to the present. I've got letters here that we filed referring Union Pacific Eagle Yard to make it a super site and assess the situation, Madam Congresswoman. We've got letters that we've sent to Union Pacific Railroad Company in Houston, Wood Preserving Works Industry, and solid waste about permits. So, we've been on TCEQ. I think now that I believe now that it's all coming to a boil. Okay. We've been in contact in my office. People have reached out plaintiff lawyers have reached out from all across the country, interested in the situation right here in Fifth Ward, Texas. Okay, and I welcome them to come in. No particular ones, but I do welcome them to come in and shake some things up as we move on and make sure that proper justice is applied to the damages that were done to our community and to the people of our community and the health of our community. So I'm looking forward to May 3rd. I want you all to know that even as late as May 3rd, my staff, Santi and Kathy and others, Cedric Crosley back there, my staff will be taking, as you walk into the hearing on May 3rd, we will be taking your written comments when you walk in, because the only comments that's going to be recognized and the only thing that TCEQ is going to hear are going to have to be in writing. So, Councilman, what we're going to do is have stations set up. As you walk into the facility, we're going to make sure that we have our staff there to type up the questions and print them so that they can officially be part of the conversation on with TCEQ on May 3rd. I think that's imperative. Those of you who were at the last, which was teleconference, didn't go too well, did it? It's kind of confusing, kind of bogged down. Yeah, I see your sister saying no. But we have several conversations, and we need to make a hard, I'm gonna use pun on words, we need to make a hard impact on this one, because this may be the last opportunity, Congresswoman, that we get to go before TCEQ for them to ask and set the record straight. There's some TCEQ facts that I just want to give everybody, some things that we've asked for, off-site pathways, we've talked about them already. Remediation, I can tell you that TCEQ in the past has already come down and gotten on Union Pacific. It's already been determined that Union Pacific has some liability and they need to do a better job of containing and cleaning the site. Unfortunately, the site has spread, as we talked about earlier this evening, and we've got to get them focused on also looking into those areas. So I'm excited about May 3rd. If anybody have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Yes, ma'am. I would ask that, more importantly, that we just, I think you should, all of us, go knock on our neighbors to the left, go knock on our neighbors to the right. Anyone that we think have been affected, if they show signs, if they don't show signs. I think this needs to be a huge, huge turnout on May 3rd. And the fact that TCEQ is coming, and EPA and others, and THEA, I think that we should make this right now, consider ourselves ringing the town bell, okay? So when you go home tonight, don't just lay down and put your file to sleep. Call the neighbors on both sides. I'd like to have a packed house, because once again, this may be the last time that we have to address TCEQ, okay? With that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions. It's a good question. I think the most important thing at this time that we do with TCEQ is let them know by inviting all of our community and our neighbors out that we are taking this serious and we're not going to go away. and there's going to have to be some changes at TCEQ. So let me just move a little further on that. TCEQ, all of our state agencies come under something called a sunset review. Okay. This summer, TCEQ will be coming under a sunset review. Okay. You know what I'm talking about, brother. Okay. I have been in conversation with my colleagues across the state, especially those that are in minority communities. In the summer, TCEQ will have to validate their existence. They will have to show if they've been fair to communities of color or not. As Congresswoman and I have talked, Sophronia Thompson and I have talked, and other leaders across the state of minority origin, we intend to provide buses and let our voices be heard with TCEQ to let them know that we absolutely 100% believe that there's been some environmental racism going on across the state of Texas. Okay, absolutely believe. Not just Houston, not just Fifth Ward, not just Houston, as far as El Paso, Laredo, Corpus Christi, and all parts of the state of Texas. And TCEQ cannot continue to just issue permits and sweep things under the rug. And sweep things under the rug and going about their business of just stamping permits. Well, if I had a message for May 3rd, call somebody, get everybody out. Let's make it as large as we possibly can. Let's get the questions in writing. See, one of the problems with us with TCEQ is we've got to put those questions in writing. They're not official unless you put them in writing, bro. Okay? So our staff will sit down when you walk in, they're going to ask you your thoughts, if there's anything you want to say, and they're going to literally type out and print for TCEQ your concerns. Yes, ma'am, you can always add with me.
Are you on, Melissa? Did we lose you? I think you did. Did you lose Melissa?
She's on.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I'm here.
Thank you. So let this be a combination for the EPA and the and what the senator said about TCEQ. And I think what is important to note is that we have to work together. And the senator has really articulated what we're dealing with TCEQ. But when I spoke, I said, we want solutions. Do we not? We want a resolution. We want solutions. And the long period of time that currently we have been dealing with TCEQ, they have managed to be slippery with very few solutions. And I think we're at a point now with the Environmental Protection Agency that the synergism of the two agencies with EPA having the federal oversight, that we may be seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. But I wanted to put this on the record. Don't be afraid. You expressed from the heart. Don't be afraid of the paper making you think that you have to write a book. Speak from the heart. If your neighbor died, just say your neighbor died. We're not going to curtail what you say to get the point. There is toxicity that has not gone away, and it has not been independently cleaned up by a private corporation. They could have done that years ago. They could have invested, and you would have had a different outcome. So please indicate that people have died, people are sick. And so I just wanted to read this, if you can hear this, Melissa. We had a request of TCEQ through our meetings, and the Environmental Surveillance and Toxicology Branch and the Texas Cancer Registry that provided a report on the occurrence of cancer in Houston. And it analyzed a half dozen types of adults referencing cancers in the Texas Cancer Registry. And they were in and around the Fifth Ward area. And these are unique cancers. Esophagus, sounds familiar, lung and bronchus, and larynx cancers were statistically and significantly greater than is expected based on cancer rates in Texas at large, located around the Union Pacific area. So one of the things that's going to be important is, pinpointing where you live, kind of the area where you live, pinpointing history, meaning it was in my family, my neighbor's family. We grew gardens. We had trees. I think when I went down some of the streets that Laverne and it's another one that I went down. But in any event, these folk had trees as well that bore fruit. I think that's right, trustee, right, Kathy? And so please just be clear. So Melissa, what I wanted to ask is that there are cases like this that have run, which is part of the data I think that you might want and other data. Is there a compensation route for individuals who have been impacted, separate and apart from any individual cases that they may have? So if a family has a history of cancer and it can be documented back to the creosote and the contamination, is there an ultimate way through the government that either Union Pacific can be forced to compensate?
Not that I am aware of through EPA avenues, particularly through the RCRA program. I would like to defer to Stacy or Dr. Nance if you guys have another thought about that you would like to share.
If you don't have an immediate answer, that includes Dr. Nance as well, would you take my question back and look at it? It doesn't necessarily have to be under RCRA. It can be other directions, other aspects of your jurisdiction. Would you try to get an answer for us?
Oh, Dr. Nance is trying to unmute.
Oh,
We're,
right.
we're not able to unmute ourselves. So there we go.
Can you help them unmute?
I just got unmuted. Thank you. And I wanted to help Melissa there, and by supporting what she said, under either the RCRA approach or the Superfund approach, there's not going to necessarily be the kind of compensation that people are thinking of. That's more of a legal approach, but we'd be happy to take that back to our legal team and get you a written answer.
I would appreciate that. And the reason why I say that is because you're leaving these people with no remedies who have been sick. And I think this needs to be very clear. When I say no remedies that would come out of the administrative process. But I don't want to preclude that without you all going back and doing the research in particular. And so, Dr. Nance, what I'm saying, if people are in families that have already died, people are in families that are suffering from cancer as we speak, and there are generations that they can document that have suffered from cancer, and maybe other extending diseases that have come from that. And I don't know if you heard me when I said that our research showed a high amount of esophagus, lung, bronchus, and larynx cancers. And that's particularly unique kinds of cancers besides the lung cancer. And I don't know whether or not they metastasize. So would you be able to at least provide us with a response on that?
Yes. And I wanted to add one sentence to what's being said, because I feel obligated to divulge, as we're learning about the risk, we need to know everything about the risk. So a cleanup would take years. I just want to put that on the table. I'm not trying to make anybody, get frustrated or anything. I'm just saying the types of cleanups that we do really take a long time. So, people can factor that fact into what is the life in this neighborhood going to be, because that's a decision that each person is making as we fight for cleanup. And even the fight takes time. time's already passed. So I just want to just be clear and transparent about that fact. That's it. That was my one sentence.
Well, let me, no, don't run out of the room. And I'm going to yield. Yes, ma'am. Sorry if I can just give.
I'm a victim of the contamination. I moved in my house on Lavin Street. I can look at my front window and see 4,900 blocks of busy road in there. That's how close I am to the contamination. And I moved back to the homestead to take care of my mother. My mother passed in 2015. 2017, I was diagnosed with a stage 1 non-aggressive lung cancer. And I'm in remission now. And I would love to be compensated. I would love to get off contamination. I'm not one of the ones that want to live there. I want to leave. And I'm just praying that they'll do the right thing and let us move away. Buy us out. Let me go. I don't want to stay. My father's dead. My mother's dead. My brother's dead. That's my whole family. I buried all of them. They all died from different illness. My father from lung cancer. So I quit smoking in 1993. And then I come up stage 1 non-aggressive lung cancer. I still keep it, knowing I had it. I'm safe from, but I quit smoking. But I'm a victim. I want to be compensated, and that's the bottom line.
So, first of all, thank you so very much, and I hope you'll be at the meeting that and to be able. These are the stories that you're looking for, Senator Miles, that we want to. And I am going to be submitting a letter, but let me just conclude the point that I was trying to make. One, we'd appreciate it if EPA would just look beyond RCRA and see if there's any other directions there where compensation can be directed, whether it's under the DOJ's intervention or not. But I'm not going to get an answer from you right now. But what I would say is just look at the circumstances. Union Pacific could have cleaned up 20 years ago. And so you would be at a point now where it was cleaned up. And so what EPA is saying is that the cleanup that we are forcing or trying to force will take, a Superfund will take a long time, or some other kind of cleanup will take a long time. And I think it is very important that we not ignore the issue of making you hold in the January 3rd meeting. Excuse me, I'm on January 3rd, the May 3rd meeting. We should not shy away from that. I cannot promote this attorney or that attorney, but what we can be engaged in is that Union Pacific, I understand, Senator Miles, and I'm going to try to add some additional personnel to that, but is there, and it's no reason why they cannot answer questions. And I think one of the things they're good at is not answering questions. And so I don't intend to malign, I only intend to give an opportunity for them to answer questions. So, yes, ma'am.
That's the question. There was some kind of contamination found in my yard. Their answer was it could have come from the lawnmower or the cars on the street. That was very.
When you come and write your documentation, just make sure that you put as extensive as you can. Let's not worry about whether our T's and I's are dotted and that we're writing prose or writing, the bestseller book. Just put it down. If you just have a list, that will work as well, and sign your name of what is happening. You really should take note of the family members that have passed away, your soil that was contaminated, the street you live on. All of that will be on the document. So that's, I just wanted EPA to realize that we had documented numbers of cancer and that it was noted that they were specific to the Fifth Ward community and very unique. And when I say Fifth Ward, the expanded Fifth Ward, Northeast Cashmere Gardens area. So.
All right, thank you very much. So we agreed with the school that we would be out of here by 8 o'clock. So we're pushing it a little bit. And so I wanted to make sure that we were able to do the drawing for the t-shirts as promised. You want me to hand it over to Miss Sandra?
Yes, anybody wanted to participate in the drawing before we start? Okay. You want to get oh, I'm sorry. They wanted 160. Okay, so that'd be $2. I got you. Yeah, I got you.
Is the Congresswoman still there?
Yes.
She's having people to record information. So even for people who don't have cancer, if you're living there, the exposure and the number of years that you've lived there is an important piece of information, even if you don't have it. That's data that we need, or that somebody will need in the future. Yeah.
Sure. Yes. Dr. Nance was reminding everyone that writing down the specific information is really important. The types of cancer, the years, the experiences is important to write that down and keep record of that.
Actually, I was saying, even if you don't have cancer, this how many years you've lived there. The exposure.
Yeah.
I don't think she's understanding what I'm saying. That's okay.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna take one question, and then I'm sorry, we will have to adjourn the meeting, but we have a question from a community member.
My name is Walter Mallet. I understand Union Pacific released better than 62,000 pages of information. Has there been anything come out of that paperwork that Union Pacific released to attorneys and whomever that the entities that were involved in that?
Whew. Dr. Nance and Melissa, did y'all hear the question? No. Okay. The question was that they understand that there have been over 60,000 pages of information released from Union Pacific, and the community member is wondering, has anything come out of all of this information that's been released?
Yeah, this is Melissa. So if I remember correctly, I believe that was information that was requested by Rodrigo. Rodrigo, are you still there? I think I remember you mentioning at a previous meeting that you had received thousands of pages of documents from them, and that wasn't.
There are several years worth of permit data. 7.5 years worth of permit data, and then really there's information even going back into the 90s when they originally got their permit in, I believe it was 1994. So maybe that's the thousands of pages of documents that you've been referencing. I know recently when I was on when we had the meeting back in January or February, I had referenced that documents even just going back from that point to fall of 2021 was several thousand pages of documents. So that's just all the permit documents that I was referencing earlier, which is of course what we've been talking about tonight, this permit that Union Pacific is obligated to get under the RCRA statute and from TCEQ.
Yeah, and
All right,
yeah,
thanks,
and we,
Rodrigo.
sorry, I was gonna say, we had also requested the documents back. It was back last fall. We had transmitted the mayor's request for information to Union Pacific, and they had responded with that. And that was all, that may be what you were referring to as well. There were thousands of pages of documents in that as well that are, so we did go through that information when we were developing our comments for on the draft permit. So
Thank you, Melissa.
sure.
Really quickly, I know we have to get out of here at 8 o'clock. My name is Daniela Flanagan, and I'm with the Coalition of Community Organizations with Reverend James Caldwell. He is recovering well from his quadruple bypass. One of the things I wanted to mention, and Sandra's a part of another group called SEER. SEER is having a sunset review training sessions this weekend. Sunset review TCQ is 11 to 1 via Zoom. It will be in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. This session this Saturday is to help you prepare for what's the people's hearing on April 30th so that you can draft your responses to TCEQ and the sunset review. So the sunset review now will be held in 5th Ward here at the Carl Walker Jr. Multi-Purpose Service Center at 4300 Noble. It'll be Saturday, April 30th, 11 to 1:30. There will be refreshments. We are busing people in from as far as Baytown. Some are coming in from Port Arthur so that we can all collaborate together and write our responses to TCEQ in the sunset review. So in Spanish, nos vemos en la audiencia del pueblo para la Comisión de Calidad Ambiental de Texas, TCEQ, sábado 30 de abril, 11 a 1:30. In persona, our Carl Walker Multi-Service Center, 4300 La Calle de Noble in Houston, Texas. And there are links for you to register for this. And on top of that, there are students where I'm at HCC whose grandparents died of cancer. So we're going to be reaching and trying to make sure that everyone's out here. Make sure your reach is not just here right now with the residents in 5th Ward. Think about the students whose grandparents have passed away and are now moved away to Pearland or wherever. So we want to make sure that our outreach is as strong as possible when we're trying to bring people to the table for this. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Who's the youngest one? Check. All right. Okay. Drum roll. Oh Lord, how did these two, do they look like Walter to me? They look like they say Walter. How did you pick him? You want which? Okay. Walter Mallet is our first winner.
All right, one more.
And which one you gonna get? The I Love 5th Ward or the Impact? I didn't know which one to do. I mean, I'm doing both of them. So which one do? Yeah, you can pick. 5th Ward. Okay. Okay.
All right. The next winner.
Roxanne. Roxanne. I ain't. Anybody want to be her man? Okay. I think Roxanne left. So how y'all want to do? Do we want to call Roxanne or do we want to get somebody that's here? What y'all want to do? I want to call Roxanne. I'm with you. I'll like first. Okay. So Roxanne, we all know Roxanne. Who got some glasses? Call Roxanne to let her know she won. Who got some glasses on right quick?
All right.
Call her right quick and let her know she won. Okay, y'all. And on the 3rd, we will do another Impact shirt and another I Love 5th Ward t-shirt on the 5th. I mean on the 3rd. I'm sorry. I'm 3rd. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to everyone online. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your presentations, EPA.